I don't know right now. I don't know for certain if a first round bye is beneficial. Hello and welcome to Always College Football. I'm Greg McElroy. Today is Monday, March 4th, 2024, and we hope that you're enjoying the show wherever you're getting the show. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the ESPN College Football YouTube channel. I'm Greg McElroy alongside Mark Kubiak, Jack Foster, and our editor, Jake Garcia. Another week has officially gone by, and college football remains a huge talking point with controversy about something that hasn't even started yet. That's typical college football, isn't it? It's like we haven't even had it yet, and yet the next iteration is already creating controversy. But that's just how we live. It's almost like we embrace controversy in our sport, and I can't say that I totally disagree, but at some point, guys, let's just not put the cart before the horse. Let's just see what the horse looks like and see how much cart it can carry. So, we're going to go over some of the 14-team playoff discussions that could start in 2026. We know we have the 12-team for the next 2 years, but there's already strong reaction and what appears to be momentum heading in the direction of a further expansion. So we're going to go over some of that today. We also have a couple more teams that have taken to the practice field in spring football. So we will break down Miami and we will break down Cincinnati. After all, we're going to try to tell the truth here on Monday, and who better than to help us understand what Tell the Truth Monday is supposed to look like than Coach O.
Tell the Truth Monday. Tell the Truth Monday. Tell the Truth Monday. Tell the Truth Monday.
The college football world continues to change, or at least our postseason format continues to change. Just last week, guys, the 14-team college football playoff model was introduced. Now, it hasn't been accepted, not yet at a point in which it's 100% going to be implemented. So let's not panic just yet. Some of the reaction is a little bit out of control. Nothing's confirmed, and there are aspects of it that I strongly dislike, but we'll get into that. So in case you haven't heard anything about it just yet, the 14-team CFP model that's been discussed would obviously go from 12 to 14. We're 12 for the next 2 years, but going to 14, in addition to the further expansion, there are increased levels of automatic qualifiers. Here in the 12-team playoff, we all kind of know what that looks like. It's a 5+7 model. There are 5 automatic qualifiers for the top 5 conference champions. Of course, the Power 4 plus 1 from the G5. Now, as we move forward into the 14, the SEC and the Big Ten are going to receive 3 automatic qualifiers apiece. The ACC and the Big 12 will receive 2 automatic qualifiers apiece. The G5 will get 1. There will be 3 at-larges. And in the event in which Notre Dame is ranked in the top 14 on Selection Day, they would also be guaranteed a spot. That's where they're at right now. And then a little bit more information came to light, and it basically told us that the SEC and the Big Ten would receive the first and second overall seeds, which would result in them receiving an automatic bye. Now, this was heavily debated. This was heavily discussed. Here's the first thing that I want to discuss as it relates to this model. The automatic qualifiers. The automatic qualifiers. I don't like automatic qualifiers to begin with. I don't like them because not all conferences are created equal. In some years, one league might have 4, maybe 5 teams that would be highly competitive at the top of the sport. In other years, there might be some conferences that don't have a single team that is capable of competing at the highest possible level. I don't believe in automatic qualifiers. Personally, I think if you want to give your automatic qualifier to your champion, I can live with that. I can. Partly because I want conference championship games still to mean something. Now, ultimately, when we fast forward 5-6 years from now, we expand to 14, potentially 16, then are conference championships really necessary? Probably not. Now, they're big money makers for the respective leagues. but they're probably not necessary in the event in which we get to a 16-team playoff, right? But you look at the ACC and the Big 12 in particular. Look, I look at the Big 10, I look at the SEC. I think 3 automatic qualifiers is probably appropriate. Probably is. Now, I don't think they're necessary, because if you were to just say, hey, we're still going to keep the 5 automatic qualifiers, just like we have in the 12 team, we'll keep the 5 automatic qualifiers, and then we're going to expand to 14. There'll be 9 at-large teams. I could probably live with that, because in most scenarios, the SEC and the Big 10 are probably going to get 3 or more anyways. When you just look at historically where those teams have fared, whether it's Michigan winning and Ohio State is the runner-up, Penn State's probably been in the top 12 at the very least. In the SEC, whether it's Bama winning or Georgia winning, you've had LSU, you've had other teams that have been close in the past, A&M in 20, Tennessee in a couple years back in 21, a handful of other years in which they would have probably had 3 anyways. But I think you can make a case that maybe the SEC and the Big 10 are probably going to be guaranteed to get 4 spots almost every year. But guaranteeing 4 spots? What if there's a weird year in which the SEC just has a really, really average group of teams, or the Big 10 for that matter? What if they have a clear champion? Number 2 is really good, but number 3 really isn't that great. Number 4 is really bad. It's possible. It's not likely, but it is certainly possible. So to guarantee a spot, to me, doesn't make sense. Now, if you want to guarantee them a portion of the revenue because they have the biggest brands, then that I can understand. But is guaranteeing the spots basically a more justifiable way of guaranteeing the revenue? Perhaps. But the thing that I have the most issues with, especially knowing what's gone on with the ACC and the Big 12 and realignment and the additions and the movement that's actually happened already, and the movement that could happen in the future. I mean, Florida State's in the midst of trying to sue the ACC to get out of their grant of rights. They're in the midst of doing that right now. So we're going to guarantee a spot for the ACC that might be in flux 3 or 4 years from now. We're going to guarantee 2 spots for them, and we're going to guarantee 2 spots for the Big 12. How does that make sense? Just look back historically of what those 2 conferences have had. 2023, as an example, the Big 12 automatic qualifiers last year would have been unranked Iowa State and Oklahoma State. Those are teams that were in the league. I'm removing Texas and Oklahoma. I know we're adding a bunch of other teams as well. So Arizona would have been in that mix as well. So it would have been Arizona potentially and Oklahoma State. Either way, Arizona was a team with several losses. Still good team, highly respected team. But do we want an unranked team possibly making the playoffs because we've guaranteed automatic qualifiers? I can't get on board for that. How about in 2019? The Big 12 automatic qualifiers would have been number 13 Baylor and an unranked 8-5 Oklahoma State team. That's in the Big 12. How about in the ACC? In the ACC, the automatic qualifiers would have been number 24 Virginia. They would have automatically qualified as the ACC's 2nd highest ranked team. They also would have been behind 3 G5 teams in front of them. 17 Memphis, 19 Appalachian State, and number 21 Cincinnati, and number 23 Navy. But because the ACC gets 2 automatic qualifiers, number 24 and the Wahoos are in. How about 2018? The Big 12 automatic qualifiers would have been number 20 West Virginia at 8-4 and an unranked 8-5 Iowa State team. Those would have been the automatic qualifiers. Now, in the ACC back in 2018, number 20 Syracuse would have gotten in. They were the ACC's 2nd highest ranked team that year. The same year, you look at it, just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It just doesn't. There are several teams that were better than Syracuse in 18. There were several teams that were better than Virginia in 2019. There were several teams that were better than Oklahoma State in 2023. Automatic qualifiers should not be part of the conversation beyond that of the conference champs. I can't get on board for that. I just can't. Even in the SEC, even in the Big 10, do we need automatic qualifiers to guarantee a spot for Ohio State in the event in which they lose to Michigan? Do we need an automatic qualifier for Alabama in the event in which they lose to Georgia in the SEC championship game, or vice versa? No, because they're going to get in anyways. So don't give me all these automatic qualifiers, because all it does is guarantee a spot for a team that might not be worthy. It makes no sense. Now, I've been told by people that are more familiar with the scenario that the reason why the SEC and the Big Ten are willing to give out the automatic qualifiers to the other leagues is because they want to avoid litigation, which makes some sense. Sounds like that's kind of at the root of what everything is at right now. Oh, I'm scared to do anything because I don't want to get sued. That's how it relates to NIL. That's how it relates to conference realignment. Everyone's scared to get sued. Understandably, I get that completely. But at the same time, are we really in a position right now to tell the ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10, and the SEC, all these teams, that we should get multiple teams from that league? Also, what about this? ACC and the Big 10 and the Big 12. What if, just saying, what if they play their conference championship game? Are the top two teams automatically in? No matter what? Or are you going to penalize a team that qualified for the conference championship game, and the event they lose, the team that actually finished third in the league is now in because they're ahead of the team that just lost in the conference championship game? It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, get rid of the automatic qualifiers. You want to give them to your conference champs? All for it. But get rid of them. It doesn't do us any good, at least at this point, in the event in which we expand to 14. But do we have to discuss expanding right now? Like, do we? I'll explain in a moment why expanding to 14 before we've had the 12 just seems backwards. As you can tell, I'm clearly a little bit flustered by what's going on in our sport and just how rapidly we're starting to accelerate change. I'll explain in a moment why I think change needs to be slow and methodical, because we've made missteps in our sport in the past. But I wasn't the only one to weigh in here. Let's take a listen to Pardon the Interruption. Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon weighed in heavily on the college football playoff format.
This is incredible to me. They haven't even done 12, and they're agitating for 14. Your conference, the Big Ten, is leading the charge here because they want automatic qualifiers. And the reason the Big Ten wants automatic qualifiers is because if you pick teams by choice and not by some sort of rule, the Big Ten is afraid that the SEC will get 8 teams in there. I understand that. I hate 14. I hate 12. Yep. Mike, this thing is going to go on for an eternity. It's going to become the NBA playoffs. 8, kids. 8. That's the right thing. The way it looks now, it's unwieldy, and it looks terribly greedy. Really greedy.
You might think I'm going to disagree. But what did we just say? What did I just say about college football people and the boosters and the people affiliated with conferences? Again, I'm one of them. It's total greed. The Big Ten ought to be ashamed, but there's no shame. The Big Ten doesn't need 4 automatic bids. There are never 4 teams in our conference worthy of going to this stupid playoffs. I hate 14. I hate 12. And I'm going to one-up you and tell you I hate 8. 4 teams is enough. Tony, it's going to be like the 64 in the NCAA tournament. They're going to have play-in games in Dayton pretty soon. This is awful. Tony, the Big Ten and the SEC are going to ruin college football as you and I prefer it.
I love your idea. I love your idea. The first 4 in Dayton. I love that. That would be tremendous if they played in Dayton.
It's awful.
Just like the NCAA basketball.
Terrible.
So great.
Unless Northwestern's one of them.
You can hear visibly upset with where everything is going. And now those guys, look, Michael Wilbon, Tony Kornheiser, they watch college football. I think they watched a decent amount of college football, but it's not really what they major in. However, those that do major in the sport also talked about their disapproval. Let's take a look at what Josh Pate had to say. No form of entertainment is immune from alienating its audience if the wrong people are in charge. Not the only one. Brett McMurphy added a proposed 14-team playoff starting in 26 would include 11 automatic bids based on conference membership because of money. Is cluster blank one word or hyphenated, here's a unique concept. The top 14 ranked teams, regardless of conference, make the playoff. I like where he's going with that. And then Stuart Mandel, the Big Ten and the SEC are threatening to undermine the CFP's credibility entirely for something they don't need, which will not make them extra money. It's beyond bizarre. Understand where they're coming from. I do agree, though. I don't understand the purpose of participation trophies. To say, oh, I just got to crack the top 3, to me feels ludicrous. And in the event in which it's going to be tough, we've already found last year just how difficult tiebreaker scenarios are in leagues without divisions. Differentiating between 3 and 4 might be very challenging. Just get rid of it. One automatic qualifier per league. Simple as that. Coaches also weighed in on this. Sonny Dykes, the head coach of TCU, said automatic first-round buys for the Big Ten and the SEC is like the NFL saying the Cowboys get a first-round buy since they have more fans than the Bengals. How preposterous is that? I would push back on that. And it's no disrespect to Sonny Dykes at all. If anything, I have an immense amount of respect for Sonny Dykes. I love Sonny Dykes, but I would argue popularity is not going to be what gets the SEC and the Big Ten to the number 1 and the number 2 spot. The strength of schedule and the challenge of playing in those leagues and ultimately winning those leagues is going to be far greater than playing the strength of schedule that TCU might have to play. Like I said, I love TCU. Big proponent, big advocate for them 2 years ago, but the schedule that they're going to have to navigate in the Big 12 is very different from the schedule that Ohio State, Penn State, Maryland, Nebraska, Georgia, Texas, those teams are going to have to beat a lot more high-quality teams. So fan base size doesn't really have a whole lot to do with the strength of schedule and the strength of record. But he wasn't the only one. Mike Gundy, who always has a very strong opinion, the head coach of Oklahoma State, went on to say a playoff format that guarantees a first-round bye to any team, division, or conference before the season starts is unheard of in any sport as far as I'm aware. Based on the premise proposed, a team could be undefeated and ranked number 1 in the country and still not receive a first-round bye because teams were awarded one before the season even began. I tend to agree with Coach Gundy. And I also would go as far as to say, I don't know right now. I don't know for certain if a first-round bye is beneficial. Now, some people will say that's ludicrous. You get an automatic path to the second round. Sure. But right now, if you look at the schedule of how the playoff is expected to be played, you would play a conference championship game on December 3rd, and you would have 4 weeks off before you have to play in a playoff game that is win or go home. 4 weeks off sounds great. Yeah, you get to rest up, you get to get healthy, you get to focus on yourselves as opposed to focusing on the opposition for a couple weeks. Sure, all that seems great, but at the same time, over the course of a 4-week span, rust could be a very big part of the equation. So if you're playing in the first round, yes, you might have to play an extra game, but you'll be able to knock off the rust on December 20th and 21st before you have to tee it up in a quarterfinal game 10 days later. Knocking off the rust, I think, might be beneficial for some, especially the teams that did not participate in a conference championship game. Here's the biggest thing that I have an issue with, though. Right now, we're talking about a 14-team playoff. 14 teams. Before we even know if the 12-team playoff is successful. We don't know that. Like, the 12-team playoff might crash and burn. I don't think it will. You and I both know we're probably going to watch it. I'm going to be highly intrigued by home game environments in the postseason. It's going to be fascinating. Maybe you get an SEC team that has to play in snow. Maybe you get a Big Ten team that has to travel to Florida and play UCF. I mean, these are things that are very fascinating to me. I can't wait to see how they all turn out. I can't wait to see maybe a G5 team and say Appalachian State. I can't wait to see a big blue blood program have to go to Boone, North Carolina to take on Appalachian State if they finish one or in the top 4 of the teams that don't receive buys. I'm fascinated by that. But Bill Hancock, the executive director of the college football playoff, said that there is a, quote, need for the deal to be done in the next month. So we have to determine what the college football playoff is going to look like in 26 and beyond in the next month. Do you realize that we went to the 12-team playoff to begin with? The original working group consisted of Big 12 commissioner at the time, Bob Bowlesby, SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey, then Mountain West Commissioner Craig Thompson, and Notre Dame Athletic Director Jack Swarbrick. You know how long it took for them to put together a 12-team playoff that was digestible and that made sense? It took them 2 years to put together a model that would be accepted by their peers. So now we have to expand in a month? And we have to sort all these things out in a month? I don't understand why. There are a million examples in college football where we have rushed into things. We've put them in place, and then, hey, we'll see what happens. I got a handful of examples that I'll tell you. And every single time we rush into something in our world, in college football, there is an unintended consequence. And I'm, to be honest with you, kind of scared about some of the unintended consequences, because some of the unintended consequences that we dealt with in the past, they don't really impact the fabric of the game that we love. They don't. But when we start talking about the possible unintended consequences of an expanded playoff, maybe it weakens the regular season. Maybe the regular season, you have more, you see Bama, Georgia play 3 times. You see Ohio State, Michigan play 3 times, maybe 4 times. Who knows? I mean, that to me seems absurd, but it could happen. And then it waters down rivalries. Like, there are unintended consequences of this expansion that we don't yet know about. And we won't know about them until we live in the 12-team playoff world. And yet, we're not even to the 12-team playoff world, and we're trying to expand further. Here's a few examples of things that happened in the last handful of years that led to unintended consequences that were actually worse for the sport. Remember when we launched the 14 playoff in 2014? Nick Saban said, well, get ready. This means other bowl games are going to die. And what happened? You don't make the playoff. Now the best players on the teams are opting out because they've been told that bowl games don't matter. The only games that matter are the playoff games. So bowl games, as a result, outside of gambling and having something to watch in December, well, I watch them. I love them. Even with backups in there, I still care. A lot of people don't, though. And I think it's alienated a lot of people from bowl games. Numbers are big, but are they important? No, that was an unintended consequence of expanding the playoff from 2 teams to 4 teams. Remember when everyone thought that NIL would actually be NIL? Well, now it's turned into pay for play. And people basically use NIL as an inducement to get guys to play for their team. That was an unintended consequence. Remember when we thought that allowing players to play 4 games and preserve a red shirt would be great for player development? Well, that was the intention. Hey, guys can still play and still redshirt and keep a year of eligibility. Well, now players are playing 4 games, going to their coach and saying, yeah, you know what? I'm good. I'm not going to play anymore this year. I'm going to redshirt and then I'm going to transfer. See MJ Morris at NC State. Remember when we thought that adding a second signing day in December was going to be good for the players because they could just sign and just have the recruiting process behind them? Well, now coaches are forcing players to sign. And if they don't sign, they're likely to have their scholarship revoked, ultimately forcing them to sign before they might be ready to sign. Every time we act too quickly in the sport, we seem to regret it because we don't consider what could come of the change that we're rushing to implement. What's the rush? The 12-team model makes sense. Now, personally, I think it's a little too big. Full disclosure. If it were 8, I would like to have seen us go to 6. I would like to have seen us go to 8. I'd like to see it go to 10 before we got to 12. Tripling the size of the playoff field feels like too much. But at least the 12-team model makes sense. Everyone was playing for something up to the final weekend of the regular season. You get a first-round bye if your numbers 1 through 4 seeds. You get home field advantage if you're 5 through 8. And you get in the field if you're 9 through 12. So it made sense. But I do wonder, will there be unintended consequences if we rush something into place that doesn't need to be done right now? The Big Ten and the SEC basically forcing their way into 3 automatic qualifiers, making sure that everybody else is good with it. Are we just kind of delaying the inevitable, though? Are we delaying the inevitable of when the SEC and the Big Ten ultimately just break away? Are we delaying the inevitable of when the Power 5, considering the ACC and the Big 12, also have 2 automatic qualifying spots, giving the Power 4 leagues 10 automatic qualifiers out of 14 in the field, and likely to comprise a vast majority of, I can't imagine 2 G5 teams getting in. So basically, you're looking at a scenario in which 13 out of 14 teams will all be from the Power 5. Are we delaying the inevitable in which they just pull away? Here's a thought from Trent Dilfer, the head coach of UAB, a very outspoken person, but he's very connected. In his time at ESPN and his time being in the private sector, coaching high school football, and now being the head coach of the UAB Blazers, here's what he had to say to me and my co-host Cole Kubelik on Mac and Cube in the morning just the other day on Jocks 94.5.
I think what's coming, I'm pretty confident in this, talking to people far more powerful than me, but these are billionaires in the Bay Area, and there's going to be a break off of about 50 to 60 teams, and they're going to be professional football. And then everybody else is going to be what you're saying. Is this, call it G5, call it college football, call whatever you want. We're going to be competing on hopefully a more level playing field. That's coming way faster than anybody can anticipate. And there's people there's venture capitalists right now actively looking to buy college franchises.
Fascinating perspective, because it does sound like that is an inevitability, and it'll be something that we'll continue to monitor here on Always College Football. We're not going to break that down right now because it does feel a ways down the road. Trent Dilfer also said that he thought maybe in the next 18 months. That to me seems very, very, very quick to get to that point, but I am not surprised that that is a growing sentiment amongst coaches and people that follow the sport, that will come. It's just a matter of when, and it's a matter of how many. Well, spring practice continues on for many teams, and a few teams will take to the field today. A couple in the Power 5, Cincinnati and Miami, and then Rice and UT San Antonio will also be starting spring practice. Let's go into the Power 5. One question for Miami, one question for Cincinnati. I think you'll be really not that surprised to know where we're going with Miami. It's Cam Ward time in Coral Gables. Now, last year, you think about what Miami was. Their biggest issues were turnovers and red zone efficiency. Those are their 2 biggest issues. And Shannon Dawson, the offensive coordinator, I think is a great offensive mind. I think he does a really good job. And it's not his fault that they ended up 108th in college football in turnovers, because there were guys open, there were just missed throws, and there were big mistakes made by Tyler Van Dyke and the rest of that offense. Also, when you look at the red zone, their touchdown efficiency was just not where it needs to be. The good news is they went out and got arguably the biggest, I think probably the biggest player in the portal all season long, and that's Cam Ward, especially with how he might upgrade that position. Now, Ward has also at times had some issues fumbling the football, has at times maybe had a few issues when it comes to taking sacks. But if you watch Cam Ward, he is incredibly athletic and does an amazing job of extending plays. Like, you watch him, it's a little bit like Johnny Manziel back in the day. Like, he gets the ball, it's not there initially, he runs around, creates time, creates space, and in scramble drills, he wears you out. They put a lot on his plate at Washington State last year. Now it's going to be up to Shannon Dawson to make sure that while Ward is still that playmaker that he's always been, but also kind of keeping him in the offense with a little more predictability down the road. Will they continue to put as much on the quarterback's shoulders as Washington State did last year? Or are they going to continue to approach it with a balanced attack? Last year, Miami ran the ball 440 times. They threw it 436 times. That is about as balanced as you'll find in college football in 2023. The Cougars, however, Washington State, they ran it just 342 times, and Cam Ward actually led the team with 120 of those 342 carries. He also added 8 rushing touchdowns. Now, he won't be doing it by himself. They bring back great receivers in Jacoby George and Xavier Restrepo, and they welcome in some talented freshmen, Jojo Trader and Nye Carr as well. Cam Ward, I think, is a massive upgrade at the position. I can't wait to see what he looks like in this offense led by Shannon Dawson. And then Cincinnati. Quarterback is the question. No denying that quarterback is of the utmost importance to Cincinnati's progress this year. Let's look at what last year was, man. It was about as disappointing as it gets. To have that roster, and I don't think the roster was that bad, by the way. You look at their front seven defensively, they had some dudes on that defense. They had some guys on both sides of the ball that were very talented. However, 1-8 in the Big 12, 3-9 overall, made it a year for Cincinnati fans they'd love to forget. Well, they go out and they hit the portal hard again. They bring in 17 new players, most notably Brendan Sorsby, who's the transfer from Indiana. Now, to run this offense at the highest possible level, you have to have that dual threat capability. And Sorsby has proven to be able to do just that. He ran the ball pretty well, especially down the stretch, 276 yards rushing last year. He's 230 pounds, so he's a big, bruising ball carrier. But the accuracy is an area where he needs to improve. That's not guaranteed that he's the starter, but all sign points to him. When we tee it up in 24, he'll be QB number 1. He did account of those 276 rushing yards last year, 151 of which came in the last 3 games. He also, you look at the 5 interceptions from last year, 3 of those 5 interceptions came in the final game of the year against Purdue. So he's a redshirt sophomore. He only played in 10 games last year and was really only the primary quarterback for 6 of those 10. So can Brendan Sorsby provide some consistency at the position? You looked at what Emory Jones was last year, came out of the gates like wildfire, 7 touchdown passes, program record in the first game of the year. Then they beat Pitt, and it's like, here we go. Cincy's right where they left off. And then everything came back down to earth. Hopefully Sorsby, or whoever ends up ultimately winning the quarterback spot, will be able to provide consistency to that position. And those transfers that they brought in, several of which are very talented and are likely to be plug-and-play pieces, hopefully they'll take to the coaching and they'll be able to be a more predictable attack here in 2024. That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. Please continue to like, rate, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your show, whether that's via the podcast, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Leave us a rating, leave us a review. You also can get the show on ESPN's College Football YouTube channel. Subscribe to the channel, and we'll keep you posted with clips and fun stuff all throughout the week. Also want to give a special shout out to our friends at Holderness and Bourne that are outfitting the show now. Very grateful to all the wonderful people at Holderness and Bourne. Their gear is unbelievable. I'm wearing one of their hoodies right now. It's so comfortable. It's unbelievable. Now, their premium apparel and accessories are inspired by the game of golf. Man, I wear it for leisure wear all the time. It's the best possible stuff with a modern fit and performance. So check them out at holdernessandbourne.com. Thank you so much again for being with us. And for all of us here at Always College Football, for Mark, Jake, Jack, I'm Greg. We hope you have a wonderful day. And remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.